Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Eliot.
And I almost forgot to say it. That little pause was me forgetting that I go first.
Well, we've only done it, it's 42 times
This
now.
is our 42nd episode, which is exactly zero significant of a number of episodes.
It really is no anniversary at all.
No. The only thing I think that's significant about was like 42nd Street. 42nd Street.
I was thinking about that. Or it's 10 episodes shy of 52, which is a magic number because that's a year, 52 weeks in a year.
Oh, and there's 52 cards. Oh, that's interesting. I've never put that together. 52. Wow, we're...
That's because they don't belong together.
Check us being random here. All right. So it is our 42nd episode. If you didn't catch last week's episode, our 41st episode, I will tell you that word from the infamous Christy Schmier, who does our show notes. She said it was her favorite episode so far. Yes. And because Taylor was away, I did a pretty disastrous job of filling in for her as far as posting everything everywhere. So we were like at a low point of social media
It's
posting.
the hidden episode. Well, not the hidden episode.
It's not the hidden episode, but I did a pretty crap job of filling in for Taylor. So you may not have heard last week's episode, but if you didn't, go check it out. So anyway, a couple quick announcements before we hop in. If you didn't catch it last week, we do now have our new website up, which is much cleaner and easier to get around. That's sohere'smystory.com. You can also use shmspodcast.com. Either one of them will get you there. Two key things to look for while you're there. Well, actually, I guess three. There's a really easy, slick player right there at the top if you want to just straight up listen right away. Right at the top there is, or in the menu, there's a join the conversation button, which will take you straight to our Facebook group if you want to join us there, which is where you can meet the infamous Nils, who is already planning to spread us across the continent and become our first full-time employee, he said in the group. We're working on it, Nils. We're working on it. And then also, as Eliot mentioned, our truly hidden episode, you can also catch the hidden / I don't know that we actually call it the hidden episode, but the episode we did not publish because it was a little blushy, a little too...
Little NSFW.
It's a tiny bit NSFW. We don't want to get your hopes up. It's not like that NSFW, but there was a lot of giggling. And I definitely probably wouldn't play it in front of my kids.
No.
So, yeah. No. Anyway, so there we have it. You want to thank our sponsors?
As always, I'd like to thank Tom Loveland of Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, and Mary Craft Staffing and HR Solutions.
And I believe you have a story.
I do have a story, and
well, don't forget to start in our traditional way.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of bizarre, but I'm sure it won't surprise you.
Okay.
So here's my story. As we've talked about on a couple of occasions, I've actually been working on getting myself back to the gym. So since the start of the year, yes, I know it was a New Year's resolution, but I've stuck with it. Just about every day I've been swimming. So I'll do weights and then I'll swim. Now, I swim anywhere between 50 and 60 lengths. I've learned that it's not a lap because I kept saying a lap is up and back would be 2 laps. But no, a lap is up and back. So I've been doing 50 or 60 lengths, which is 25 or 30 laps. But I much like the numbers 50 and 60 better than 25 to 30.
Sure.
So anyway, but while you're swimming, you can't really listen to music. So it's just really, and I find this kind of therapeutic, just me and my thoughts, right? So I'm going back and forth. It's scary in there.
I just shuddered a tiny bit.
but just repetitive, and it's up and back. So you're swimming for half an hour, and it's just the repetitive motion, just me and my thoughts. And so I have this app on my Apple Watch that keeps track of all of this data, number of strokes and how long you've gone, and the speed. And my speed varies with each workout. And so I became interested in finding out why that is. And here's the really weird part. While I'm swimming, I think about various things.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like a dream that you remember when you wake up. There are certain topics that I think about that occupy me while I'm swimming. And I started to write them down.
It's almost like a dream journal, but
it was a journal. It was a swim journal.
Your length journal.
So I was that
lap journal.
No. So I started to write down for each workout, well, what was I really thinking about? And then I would compare that to the speed.
I cannot.
On these dates.
I can't even tell you how excited I am to find out what scientific conclusion you have drawn.
Well, what I've realized is
because I'm making up like 12 in my head right now.
There are times that I get into the pool and I'm just kind of there, not thinking about anything in particular. I'm just going along, finishing my workout, and everything's fine. But there are times when, and the second one, there are times I'm just thinking about various people or what I have to do during the day, and that's fine.
Sure.
But there are times when something's really irritating me. The example is when I've gotten in the morning or the evening before an email from a lawyer on the other side or even from a client that ticks me off. I'm irritated by, or I don't know how to respond to, or I've got to resolve it. You know, it could even be one of my son's teachers if they email me, but something that's really preoccupying me, particularly when I know I've got to respond. And the response I want to give is not really one that I can give without editing, because if I hit send and it's just not going to work out well.
Yes.
And I noticed that, and my term, and you've heard me use this before, but my term is when people are living rent-free in my head, when I just can't get beyond something and it's really irritating me, I am much faster.
That is fascinating.
Because I'm really, and it's not that I'm
This is possibly the only positive use for that experience.
Yeah.
The only positive use for that experience of having this like conversation, because it's not even the people living rent free in your head. It's the conversation you're having with them living rent free in your head.
And it doesn't necessarily correspond to, I shouldn't say necessarily. It does not correspond to the size of the issue. It's not like, I'm in an intense negotiation in an $80 million contract, and so therefore, no.
So I would love for you to,
little issues.
I was going to say, I would actually love for you to graph it. I bet it does correspond to the size of the issue.
Oh, you think
negatively?
Yes.
The more petty,
indirectly
and
proportional,
stupid, and just nonsensical the thing is, the less it should bother you, the faster you probably swim.
That's probably, look, I'll give you an example, and you're probably exactly right. So I was in Wegmans the other day, and Wegmans is so close to my office. I get lunch there almost every day, and there's a checkout place where people go just with their lunch, and maybe if they get nectarines or something, but just little things. It's like produce and a sandwich.
Right.
That's pretty much.
You don't go there with your cart.
Tea.
I know exactly where you.
Yes.
No.
So there was this woman, and they have 4 cashiers and this snaking line.
It's not even built for carts.
No. And this woman took one of the carts. Now, granted, it was one of the little carts, but she had both of the levels full, and she was up there at the cashier, and I was waiting for the cashier. I was like, come on, Vanessa. I know you can just direct her to the regular checkout line. I know that's what you want to do.
Do the right thing.
But no, Vanessa did not. And so she took her, and this woman was taking up all of this time. And I was irrationally angry about this. Yeah. It was 2 weeks ago, and you can still hear
you're still
angry
mad.
about this. Well,
and then I get mad that I'm irrationally mad.
Yes. So this was one of the things that really made my lap swimming a lot faster. Mm-hmm. So it was just because this woman, with her little cart in the wrong line, had taken up space rent-free in my head.
I love this because, you know why I love this so much? Because I have come in here with stories about things that have happened to me or to one of my clients that I think you're just going to blow your top off. But you'd be like, oh my God, that's terrible. And you're so level-headed that it's actually quite unsatisfying sometimes. like I remember when I came in to tell you about my client, like that egregious thing that's happening to my client where somebody's like, stepping, pretending to be them or whatever. And I thought you'd be like, oh my God. No. You're like, okay, interesting.
All
like
right.
you just don't, it's hard to get a rise out of you.
Yeah, well, see, why don't you come and do something petty and nonsensical, and then that'll do it.
No, but I am fascinated that you have tracked this back to swimming speed. Because I'm not joking. I think it's the only valuable use at that time, because otherwise I remember the first time personally that you used that expression with me. And it was when somebody was in my head about something. And I was so irritated that I was having to even deal with it. And I was like, I don't even know why this bothers me. And you said it bothers you because now you have to spend the whole day trying to decide how you respond to that text. And, if you don't respond to it all, that looks like you're being passive aggressive. If you respond to it, then how do you respond to it? You don't want to be too happy. You don't want to be too this. And the fact that you're even having to think about that, because part of you wants to just ignore it, but then that sends a message as well. And you're irritated that you are forced to contribute brain space. To that, I was like, that is exactly why I am irritated right now. So yeah, it's when these things take root in your brain. I always laugh at my husband when we're driving in the car, and he'll do this thing where all of a sudden he'll make this like grand hand gesture with one or both hands, like almost like you're like, well, anyway, and that's my point, and I almost like you're doing like opening argument or closing arguments in a trial or something. And I always joke with him, I'm like, are you winning? Like, and he'll laugh. He's like, yeah, I'm winning this argument that I'm having in my head with no one.
Right. I mean, but that's why I spend so much of my time winning arguments in the car when nobody else is there. But to me, it was a tangible, this tracking thing was tangible evidence of the actual physical expenditure of energy.
Well, yes. And so in that case, it actually works for you because it makes you swim faster. But I would guarantee if there was a way to like heat map or infrared light or whatever, if there was a way to scan for the energy load that puts on you, I think it would be just as visible. And in every other circumstance it's a drain. Now, maybe if you're driving in the car, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a weird pastime or something.
Well, it is if you go 90.
But I get irritated by it because especially when I can feel it dragging otherwise good neurons away from things that would actually be useful for me to be thinking about. So how other than swimming your little heart out, how do you deal with, like, how do you exorcise those things? Because you can't always just shake them off.
No, you can't. And, I know that tried and true advice that you always hear is, well, I type out a really angry email and then I delete it and I feel better. And sure, that can work, but
it can.
But there was a time, what I realized that I have to do fairly often is actually discuss it, but wait until I can discuss it in a calculating way. And I'll give you an example that's fairly recent. Somebody had prepared something for me in my office, and I thought in advance of a proceeding, and I thought that it was carelessly done. Mm-hmm. And more than that, what really took up the space in my head is I thought that the person who had done it knew it was carelessly done, but figure it didn't matter too much because it was only for me and not for the court or something like that, and didn't care enough to fix it. And for me, that was my interpretation. Okay. And for me, it's a hot button. I don't really, if you don't know how to do something and you want to talk about it and you want to learn, and that's great, just ask the question. I won't criticize for a lack of knowledge, but I will criticize for a lack of effort. And so I was really angry, and I was so tempted to call the person into my office and have the conversation because I thought it had to be addressed. And as a leader, I knew I could not leave it unaddressed if there was a lack of effort or some sort of apathy when it comes to doing something for which we were charging a client. So even if it's internal preparation. So I did have that conversation, but I waited overnight. I waited overnight to actually have the talk, and I'm glad I did because I waited long enough so that I could frame it as questions as opposed to accusations.
Right.
And I could say, this is how I interpreted it as opposed to you did this.
Aren't you impressed that I didn't jump right in with like, well, that may or may not have been like, I bit my tongue and I let you get there. So that's one of my hot buttons. So, and when we had the conversation, I said, this is how I interpreted it. And this is what I felt about it. And this is why for something seemingly so small, it's a big issue to me. And so she said to me,
no, this is why I did it this way. And I agree with you. I should have asked the question. But it wasn't that I didn't care because I didn't think it was wrong. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think it was wrong. And this was my logic. And so we were able to turn the conversation to a way to prevent this through better communication,
right,
as opposed to an accusation that you don't care and I won't tolerate it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We've done, I think, a whole episode on this of just like stopping short in those conversations of assigning intent, or prescribing intent of someone else. And just, I both love and yet don't know if I would quite use the phrase exactly this way, but I won't change it because I'm quoting someone. I think it was Brene Brown, maybe. It might have been that other lady whose name I can't think of at the moment. Christy, figure out who this is.
Kardashian, Dick Van Patten.
No. But she said this, I'm pretty sure it's Brene Brown, that she says, this is the story that I'm making up. Instead of like, here was my impression or here was my whatever. She says, okay, this is the story I'm making up, that, you did this and it's because of blah, blah, blah. And I like that it just sort of very blatantly says like, here are these things. So that's one way you can kind of to me, the way I think of it is I sometimes slightly similar. I let it stew into, not stew in the way stews normally used where it like boils over, but I let it stew the way you like boil down. What's it called when you like reduction, like till it reduces down to just the real truth of something. And interestingly, the question I always ask myself as I'm letting something kind of, it's almost like I let the really reactive emotions burn off of it like that, is often what I've noticed when I get down to it is that there's some kind of boundary I need to set. Like usually I've gotten incensed because there's something that I need to like draw a better boundary around. So there's what needs to be communicated sometimes, is like, okay, this is what does and doesn't work for me. So sometimes that's what I'm listening for in that. But I know, and I'm trying to think, because I know that there have been some more creative and probably silly ways that I've handled these kinds of things. And I'm quite certain you probably have to. I would love this. By the way, folks, this is a topic that is just waiting to hear from you, how you deal with these things. Like how I would especially love some particularly creative or interesting or goofy or hysterical or possibly even embarrassing ways that you handle these people and conversations that are stuck in your head, that are draining your energy. I mean, the place where I know I have to find some way to exorcise it is when it starts to take up all my interstitial space where I'm like driving and I'm thinking of it, or in between other things, all of a sudden it gets all my little extra in between thought places. That's when I'm bugged. Yeah.
Or when my speed is over 1.7 miles per hour in the pool. But I will tell you one other, it was probably a stupid way. I can't decide whether it was a stupid or
I think for you should
way.
Just save all those conversations for swimming. Like yes. you'll be a stick.
I will be. Yes. But ultimately satisfying. I had this, and I might have mentioned this to you before, but I had a matter with a lawyer on the other side, and it was a large case. So I brought one of my associates with me, and he found her to be incredibly attractive. And so he started hitting on her. And this is years and years ago. And this is well before not only #MeToo, but well before hashtag. And he was she handled it like a pro, and she was really good about it. She and I had talked about it. But at that point, I was concerned that if I said something to him, it ultimately would act against the interests of our client. And so I was stuck. And so I'm not saying that I handled this the best way and not saying something immediately. It wasn't egregious like a touching or anything like that, but it was just that's the law. An unprivileged touching is a battery. But anyway, so it wasn't egregious like that, but it was certainly unprofessional and inappropriate, the things and the snide comments and things. Yes. Yeah. So what I did after a meeting, I decided, you can decide on your own whether this is petty or passive aggressive, but I decided that I would send her, my associate, an email telling her how sorry I was that she had to go through this, and this is not the way a professional would act, and it's really a bad role model, and I really hope she learns from this, but this is not the way I think a member of the bar should act. And I put it over top of an email that he had sent, and I made it look like I had mistakenly hit reply all. So it went to him as well as to her. And I remember when she saw that, she went to another attorney in my office and she said, Eliot just sent this. I don't know whether he knew that it went to this guy. And the attorney in my office, who knew me very well, said he knew exactly who it went to.
That's so funny. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any getting around that being like uber passive aggressive, but I kind of like it. I have to say, it's like just well thought out enough that I'm actually, I think I approve.
He did. He sent back an email saying, I'm not sure if you meant this to go to me, but I received it. And in any case, I didn't mean to do something, so I apologize if any of my comments were, and he said whatever you would say even in the hashtag Me Too era, if you wanted to defend yourself. And that was fine. And we had come close to the end of the case, so I can't say that solved anything because the case just ended and we didn't have any more contact. But that was one of the stupid ways that I handled what was taking up space in my brain.
That's probably not like textbook advice for how to handle things.
No,
like you probably have talked to. I know.
Stupid.
Look how I set you up. Like, tell me a funny story, and then I'll make fun of you
so
for it.
There you go. Mock away.
Mockery is the highest form of love. Yeah, I am sure that I have handled it some other ways. I mean,
there would have to be other ways.
There would have to be. Well, definitely not that one. I haven't done that one, but this is why I would love to hear from folks in the Facebook group. I think that I think it's particularly challenging when a couple of these circumstances we've brought up is, whatever you said, Vanessa in the grocery store, that was a total stranger. The example that I used was a really good friend that we'd had sort of a falling out, and in your case, it was like a very almost professional strangers. There were like the added layers of, if you were just there representing your company, you may have handled that issue with that guy and your associate one way, but you were there representing someone else's company, which adds another layer of how you handle these things. And I think that it's even more tricky when it involves close people in your office or good friends or family members. And so I think the thing that I most like about this topic, because this might, I could imagine someone might listen to this and think, well, what does this really have to do with business? I can't think of anything that is more important than your energetic and time, like how you manage your energy and your time and your thoughts. And so when something is draining energy from you, even if that's making you swim twice as fast, it's significant and it's worth noticing. So, I think you just noticing that someone else is taking up that space in your brain and at least deciding whether or not they're worth it or whether you want, because that's one thing we haven't touched on is we're talking about how to make yourself feel better. Are you ever able to just simply say, I'm not going to give this credence. I'm just not going to deal with this.
Yeah. I mean, I am able to say that. And I'm able to refrain from dealing with it. See, I just said that.
I just said it.
And, I'm able to refrain from dealing with it, but it takes me a while to compartmentalize to the point where I forget it. But, one of the points that, and this is probably a whole nother episode, but I'll just touch on it now, is it's the flip side. It's not only letting people live rent-free in your head and what that can do to your productivity and your clarity of thought, but also, and certainly as a leader, you always run the risk of having your raised eyebrow live rent-free in somebody else's head.
Oh.
So it's kind of the care and feeding in my world. It's the care and feeding of a leader where I want to make sure that, make sure to the extent I can, that no one in my organization is wasting needless energy.
Is swimming 3 times as fast.
Yeah. Rather than just coming to me and saying, what the hell did you mean by that? Or
why did you take your cart to that line at Wegmans?
Right. Or are you upset about this? Or why didn't you answer me when I texted? Whatever it was.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. If you recognize in yourself that other people have the tendency to live rent-free in your head, then you have to guard against your tendency
where you're squatting.
Yes, be aware of where you're squatting. Yes.
No, that is interesting. Wow, I love that. I think we might have to do a whole other episode on that, because I think that awareness of what signs someone's showing when they are having a conversation with you in their heads that you're not privy to, those are really great things. Because I absolutely think there's some very clear telltale signs of that. So yeah, let's say that for a whole another episode though.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. It's like our Mr. Rogers voice. Okay.
Okay.
Next time, kid. How did he sign off? I don't even remember now.
I think he said something like, didn't he say, I like you just the way you are?
Well, he said that a lot, but not at the end.
I thought it was at the end.
No.
Christy? I'm acting like she's actually right across the table. Hey, Christy!
Christy!
We need somebody to figure out.
Bring my quote.
The last thing that Mr. Rogers used to say.
All right, let's leave it there.
Okay. So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Eliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.